tonight. So we know your politics, and I don't want to focus on that today. What I'd like to focus on is getting to know you as a person.
Having a strong family and friends group is so important.
That came from my parents.
Politics is personal. Good evening and welcome to Made in Northern New York. I'm Alex Hazard. Tonight, we're gonna sit down with our candidates for Congress, like you've never seen them before. Well, Elise, we have seen your political ads.
I'm Elise Stefanik, and I approve this message.
Tedra, we have seen your ads.
I'm Tedra Cobb, and I approve this message.
We have seen ads about you.
Stefanik shows up for Trump rallies, but won't even do her job.
We've seen ads about you.
Thankfully, Tedra Cobb will never be called Congresswoman.
We've come to your press conferences and rallies like we are at here today. So we know your politics. And today what I would like to do is really slow down and just get to know you as a person. So thank you for allowing us to do this in this personal way.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, Alex.
So we know your politics, and I don't want to focus on that today. What I'd like to focus on is getting to know you as a person. So thank you for inviting us to your home.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to get to know you and let people get to know me.
Now, while this special is far from a debate, we did take from their format and broke the evening into categories. We start with their upbringing. We're here in Queensbury, which is not far from Albany, where you were born, and you went to an all-girls school. What was that like?
You know, I actually loved my experience. I graduated from Albany Academy for Girls, which is the oldest continuous girls' school in the country. And I think it goes back to sort of our unique history in upstate New York, standing up for women's empowerment and women's leadership. But I had a great experience there. I had amazing teachers who really changed my life. I actually transferred to Albany Academy in the middle of 4th grade. I had some issues at my previous school with bullying, and at Albany Academy I just was welcomed academically. It was very challenging for me, especially going through that transfer, but I just wouldn't be where I am today were it not for that tremendous educational experience and also the leadership opportunities, because if you think about it, at an all-girls school, whether you're the captain of a sports team, whether you're head of student council, it's all women, young women who are leaders. So it was a great experience, and I actually have had some of our interns over the years that also graduated from there.
So you mentioned there being young and overcoming a bullying experience. At that young age, how did you do that, and how did being at a new school help you do that?
You know, I think schools, I think any parent will tell you that a school environment and what a child's needs are different for every kid. And I was a really academically oriented kid, and I was also pretty quiet as a student. And my teachers took the time to sort of pull me out of my shell and really encourage my academic focus, but also helped me build my confidence when it came to, you know, class presentations. And I just, you know, I think it goes back to the teachers in terms of making that smooth transition for me.
Well, let's start with growing up in Fairport with 10 siblings. What was that like?
Well, I have one biological brother, and I had foster siblings growing up. And then when I was in 3rd grade, I came home from school and my mom said, there's a sibling group of 5. I was in 2nd grade. And she said, there's a sibling group of 5 and somebody needs to adopt them. And if we don't adopt them, they'll be separated. And me being me said, okay. And so suddenly our family grew and then grew from there. And then when I was in middle school, my mother and father started a foster care agency for what people called at the time hard to place children. Now we would say homeless. What happens with teenagers often is that the social services can't find a home. They often have some pretty rough backgrounds. So our home became a temporary foster home and a permanent foster home for some, but temporary so that kids, while my parents and while the agency was finding placements, kids would come. So I grew up in what I like to say, love and mayhem.
How does that impact what you're doing now?
Well, my parents taught me the value of community service, and also the value of compassion and listening, and really that compassion is strength. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. I remember coming home before we adopted the 5 kids to a house full of people who they dropped off clothing, they dropped off food, people were making bunk beds. As you can imagine, I mean, suddenly there was just our family grew quickly, and we didn't have, my dad was a teacher, my mother did not work. So I also learned that it's okay to need help sometimes, whether it's food or clothing or those kinds of things. And so that has always been who I am as an adult.
After high school, both candidates took different paths through university. You graduate from high school and you decide to go to Harvard to study government. At a young age, how did you decide that that's what you wanted to study?
Well, I actually tie it back to being a high school senior during 9/11, where you immediately become globally aware in a very unique way at that unique chapter of your life. I knew I wanted to pursue public policy. I didn't know quite what I wanted to do specifically, but I took a lot of classes in the Department of Government and had a great experience at the Institute of Politics, which is bipartisan, and it's really the venue for students of all political beliefs to hear from experts, to hear guest speakers, to get to know other folks interested in public policy, and it was just a great experience to get involved.
So there you were studying government. You made the decision that you wanted to study government. Now you're in government. Is it what you thought it would be?
You know, I think it's very different being in government and having your name on the ballot rather than studying it. The most important part of serving in elected office is listening to the people. And they don't necessarily talk about that much in the classrooms, but that is fundamentally what these jobs are about, is listening to your constituents and bringing their voice and really hearing their priorities and bringing that to Washington.
So you mentioned going to SUNY Potsdam. You decided to study Spanish.
Yeah.
Interesting choice in the North Country. Why did you choose to study Spanish?
Well, my undergraduate is actually in Spanish and sociology, and I thought I would be a social worker because of the adoption and so many foster siblings. So I thought that's what I would do. As it happened, I ended up getting a job at Riverview Correctional Facility. And I was the Spanish-speaking correction counselor. And so I had my own caseload, but also it was in the early 90s, and I was doing a lot of translating for testing for doctors doing HIV testing. And so I would give the test and the test result, which unfortunately at that time was often positive, and then help the men explain to their families. The other thing I did in the prison system was translate for security. So I really have, I think, a really good understanding of law enforcement and a good relationship with law enforcement because of that experience. When I left the prison, then I ended up, I left working in the prison, I should clarify. I ended up doing HIV and AIDS work for many years.
After the break. So these are heavy topics. How do you separate the two lives, your personal and your professional life? And what do you do when you're not working? And later on, why run for re-election now?
So I'm running on my record of results. I have kept my promises for this district.
In 2017, Elise Stefanik voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That's when I decided to run.
Welcome back to Made in Northern New York. Tonight, we've been getting to know our candidates for Congress. Before the break, we talked about their education. Now we move on to their early careers. First job out of school, a little unconventional. You go right to working for President George W. Bush. How did that happen, one? And two, what was it like? And how was that your first job out of college?
Well, my senior year, I didn't have a job until like the week before I graduated, because when you pursue jobs in public policy, unlike some other industries where there's a real specific path you take, you kind of have to see what's available and make sure it's a match for your, what you've studied in school. So I applied for a job. I initially was not hired by the White House, and then applied for a second job and got it the week before I graduated. And I worked in the West Wing on the Domestic Policy Council, and then in the Chief of Staff's office. And this was at the tail end of President Bush's administration. And it was also during the transition from President Bush to President Obama. So it was interesting to see from the Chief of Staff's perspective how much planning went into that.
When I left the prison, then I ended up, I left working in the prison, I should clarify. I ended up doing HIV and AIDS work for many years. So interestingly enough, I have used my Spanish because I've taught English as a second language. I did HIV and AIDS education in El Salvador. So it just was a love of mine, and then I've been able to sort of use it professionally and in this community as a teacher and even in healthcare.
As we got to know our candidates, we shifted the conversation for a few moments from their career to their personal life and that work-life balance. So these are heavy topics. These are things that you are working on for, I'm assuming, long hours during the day. How do you then come home and leave work at work? Do you do that? And what do you do for fun?
So this job is pretty 24/7. A lot of people, as in every job, you're available using technology. So I get lots of texts, lots of messages, lots of phone calls throughout the day. That's part of my job. But when I do try to kind of turn off at the end of the night before going to sleep, I'm a big reader. I love to read. I post my, personal reading list at the end of every year. And it's interesting, when I'm out and about in the district, people ask me, what are you reading lately? I love historical fiction. I love biographies. And I kind of have an eclectic reading taste. Also for fun, I like to cook. We try to be really, we try to cook on Sundays together, my husband and I. And both my parents were good cooks when I was growing up, so that's an important part of our life. And then when I'm able to, we like getting outdoors. Particularly in the winter, I like to ski, and my dad is a huge skier, so we like to go skiing with my dad.
This is heavy stuff. I mean, to think about and work on these things and talk about these things, all day, then come home. How do you separate the two lives, your personal and your professional life? And what do you do when you're not working?
So first and foremost, I'm not sure that I separate very well. I think for me, again, it's about being a public servant. And I make a lot of time. My daughter used to say to me, Mom, if I would say, do you want to go to the store? She'd say, is it 5 minutes or is it 50? And I'd say, it depends on who needs me. I think that's the root of who I am as a public servant, as a person in this community. It's a listener and in very many ways a caretaker and a fighter. Again, compassion is strength, right? So for me, being home, I like to cook. I like to eat.
Me
so
too.
Cooking and eating go together. My husband was very skinny when we were married, not so much now. So I think for me, being home is often about just the nest, right?
Both have mentioned their spouses as an important part of their life, so I was curious to hear their love stories. So somewhere along the way, you meet your husband, Matt. How did that happen? How did you guys fall in love? What's your love story?
So I met Matt through mutual friends, and we met at a party in Washington, D.C., and Matt has been one of my biggest supporters just personally as a significant other, and was, especially in your late 20s, it's kind of a challenging conversation to have with a significant other saying, hey, I'm thinking of running for Congress. Some people wouldn't think that's cool or the right thing to do. He was so supportive and encouraging, and I'm very, very appreciative to this day. And despite the challenges and the craziness in the media, having a strong family and friends group is so important.
So somewhere along the line, you meet your husband, Scott.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I met Scott when I was in college. In St. Lawrence County, when I was in college, they were going to build a garbage incinerator. And it was actually going to be in Ogdensburg on the river. And I started with other people in the community saying this is environmentally a terrible thing to do. And so I spied Scott, and eventually we met each other. And our first date was at Lamson Falls. We went on a nice walk in the woods, and he was an organic farmer. And I remember him giving me carrots, and they were dirty. And he didn't think about washing them. He was very shy. And I thought, okay. And there you go. 30 years later, we've been married for over 30 years, so.
Coming up, if there were to be one thing that somebody watching here tonight were to take away that you wanted them to know about you as a person, what would it be?
It is my integrity. It is at the end of the day, you will know who I am.
I am 100% focused on delivering results to this district.
Thanks for tuning in this evening to Made in Northern New York. Tonight, we've had the very special opportunity to sit down with our candidates for Congress. And up until this point, we've done a really good job at avoiding politics. But after all, they are running for a political seat. So I started this interview by saying that I really wanted to stay away from politics, but as you know, the saying, politics is personal, and that's why we wanted to do this interview. But why run for re-election now?
So I'm running on my record of results. I have kept my promises for this district. I've focused on delivering results, whether it's funding for our hospitals, particularly during this challenging year of COVID, whether it's being the #1 advocate for Fort Drum. That was a big challenge that I faced in my first term. Fort Drum was at risk of losing thousands and thousands of soldiers because of defense cuts, and we were cut the least out of any Army base in the country, and I led that effort, uniting the entire New York delegation. I also am really proud of the results passing the Farm Bill, which was bipartisan, that helps our local farmers, as well as supporting the renegotiated trade deal, which is important for Northern New York and important for our U.S.-Canadian trade.
In this case, my daughter Ada has something called degenerative disc disease. And so when I was done with the legislature in 2010, I just thought I was done with politics. A career in politics is not what I wanted. Fast forward to 2015, Ada was unable to walk and to stand. I mean, it took many months, but she lost the ability to walk and to stand. And as you can imagine, as a mom, it was terrifying. But we were lucky because we had insurance. So Ada had her back surgery. A month later, I lost my job and we lost our insurance. That was 2015. In 2017, Elise Stefanik voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, kick 64,000 people off their health care, their insurance, and to rip away protections for people with pre-existing conditions like Ada. That's when I decided to run.
As our interviews came to a close, we talked about their lasting impressions. You're everywhere. I mean, you're in ads, you're in the paper, you're doing these digital things, you're on television, and there's conflicting messages about all candidates out there all the time. If there were to be one thing that somebody watching here tonight were to take away that you wanted them to know about you as a person, what would it be?
I am 100% focused on delivering results to this district, and I have a record that shows that. I'm in the top 5% most bipartisan members of Congress, and I've worked to get things done, whether it's gaining $4 million of VA benefits for veterans, whether it's legislative solutions and, as I said, passing a bipartisan farm bill to help our farmers, or whether it's delivering really targeted relief during this COVID pandemic. People know I get results, and that's what I'm focused on. There is a lot of sort of chatter and news story of the day, but regardless of what that news story of the day is, my #1 focus every day is to deliver results to our communities.
If there was one thing that you wanted somebody at home here in the North Country to take home from this interview, that you wanted them to know about you, what would it be?
It is my integrity. It is at the end of the day, you will know who I am, and I will be honest about who I am, and that I will be passionate about helping you and your family be successful. That's what it means for me, has always meant in terms of being a public servant. That I am who I am, I'm confident in who I am, and in my caring for others. And that's what drives me every day.
We'll be right back. Thanks again for getting to know our congressional candidates with us tonight. There's more exclusive content from these interviews on informnny.com. I'm Alex Hazard. Good night.
We are the believers, we are the hope keepers, living to make a difference. We are from the East Coast, we are from the West Coast, we are from the South.